Welcome to a new episode on the JAP Advisors and AS Clinic podcast.
It is great to be here for this one. We have a really massive topic today.
We absolutely do. So I want you, the listener, to just imagine for a second that you are the chief financial officer of this, massive manufacturing firm.
Right, a really high-stakes position.
Exactly. And you have just spent months perfectly hedging your company against a potentially catastrophic currency crash.
You've locked everything in.
Yeah, you've locked in your rates, you've protected your margins, and, well, economically speaking, your business is an absolute fortress.
Which is exactly what a good CFO should be doing.
Right, but then your auditor just strolls into your office and tells you that because your mathematical hedge effectiveness came in at, let's say, 79% instead of an arbitrary 80%, you fail.
You just completely fail the accounting test.
Yeah. Suddenly, the accounting rules force you to report this massive, terrifying volatility directly to your investors.
Which is a nightmare.
It's a total nightmare. On paper, you look like a reckless gambler, even though, in the real world, you did absolutely everything right.
And that disconnect, that gap between reality and the financial statements is exactly what we are tearing into today.
Exactly. Today, we are taking a deep dive into how a new accounting standard finally fixed this absurdity.
It really is a complete paradigm shift. We're looking at what happens when the financial world replaces these rigid mathematical speed limits with an actual guiding philosophy.
I love that framing. So whether you are an auditor who's, staring down a really complex derivative portfolio,
or a finance executive trying to explain these new rules to your board,
or even just a student trying to wrap your head around modern financial instruments, this deep dive is absolutely going to challenge your assumptions.
It really fundamentally alters the DNA of financial reporting. We are moving away from a system where the tail wags the dog.
Oh, totally. Where companies actually structured their real-world business just to pass an accounting exam.
Exactly. And we're moving toward a system that demands the financial statements reflect the actual economic reality of what the business is doing.
But before we get into the weeds of this standard, we really need to lay out the sandbox we are playing in. We need some ground rules.
Yes, absolutely. We need strict parameters, or else the complex math we're going to discuss later will just, turn into complete soup.
Right. So for the entirety of this deep dive, we are establishing that the functional and presentation currency of our hypothetical entity is the Indian rupee, the INR.
That is our home base.
Yep, INR is home base. Therefore, any other currency we mentioned today, like, say, the US dollar, is strictly defined as a foreign currency.
Got it. INR is home, USD is foreign. That keeps it clean.
Exactly. Second rule, our reporting period follows the standard Indian financial year.
So that begins on April 1st and ends on March 31st.
Right. And I want you to keep that March 31st date absolutely pinned to the front of your mind.
It's going to become very important later.
Oh, it is the crucial pivot point for some of the most complex rebalancing mechanics we're going to get into.
Those are perfect guardrails.
Now, you might be wondering where we are pulling this highly specific, highly technical scenario from.
Because we didn't just invent this in a vacuum.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
This entire issue comes directly from the massive issue repository on gapadvisors.com.
Which, if you haven't explored it, is just an absolute goldmine.
It really is. It hosts over 4,500 highly specific issues and their detailed responses on both Ind AS and Indian GAAP.
The sheer volume of edge cases documented there is staggering. It's an indispensable tool.
And the best part, the most valuable part, is the accessibility. Anyone can register for free on the platform.
And once you're in, you can actually submit your own issues, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can submit complex real-world issues on Ind AS and Indian GAAP, and you receive these really comprehensive expert responses delivered directly to your registered email inbox.
Think about the application of that, especially if you're an auditor.
Oh, the panic of trying to document exactly how you addressed a highly nuanced Ind AS application issue in your audit file. It's real.
Having this level of expert written analysis sent straight to you provides a massive foundation for that documentation.
It totally bridges the gap between, theoretical textbook standards and the messy reality of daily finance.
It really does.
In fact, today's specific dilemma was featured prominently in the 217th edition of the GAAP Advisors Task Weekly newsletter.
Authored by C.A. Manishti Iyer?
Yes, the director of GAAP Advisors. It's published regularly on LinkedIn, And with over 230 editions published to date, the compounding wealth of knowledge there is just incredible.
It really is a fantastic resource. But as we dive into this knowledge, I do need to issue a necessary professional disclaimer.
Right, the legal guardrails. Go for it.
The views expressed in this deep dive are the personal views of the author and are not binding on the audience.
Because we are navigating some highly complex concepts today.
Exactly. So the audience is requested to seek the help of a qualified expert before taking or, refraining from taking any action based on the views discussed herein.
Perfect. All right, the table is set. Let's look at the core dilemma here.
Let's do it.
Under the old accounting standards, specifically Ind AS 39, hedge accounting was governed by what we call a bright line test.
The infamous 80 to 125% rule.
Right. If your hedging instrument offsets your risk anywhere between 80% and 125%, you were golden. You were granted the privilege of hedge accounting.
But if you hit 79.9%,
You failed. It was just brutal. But the standard we are discussing today, Ind AS 109, took an absolute sledgehammer to that rule.
it completely deleted that mathematical boundary. It's gone.
So we have a querist who submitted a very anxious question to Gap advisors, and I think it perfectly captures the panic of an industry that just, lost its safety net.
What exactly did the querist ask? Let's hear the actual question.
They pointed out that Ind AS 109 visibly does not specify a quantitative range for hedge effectiveness.
Which is true.
So because of that, they ask, can an effectiveness rate of 75%, or conversely 130%, be considered effective under the new standard?
They're looking for the new boundaries.
Exactly. They ask, what is the actual guidance now? And does Ind AS 109 categorically ban the use of that previous 80 to 125% range?
You can practically hear the anxiety in that submission. I mean, they want to know where the new walls are painted.
You really do.
And right off the bat, we need to validate their foundational assumption. Ind AS 109 has indeed abandoned that strict rule.
It's completely dead.
The bright line test is a ghost. But
Yeah.
to answer their specific question about 75% or 130%, we have to unpack what replaced that ghost.
Well, wait, let's play devil's advocate here for a second. Because auditors love numbers.
Oh, yeah, they thrive on them.
We love black and white rules because they are objective. You can just point to a calculator and say, look, there is the proof.
Exactly. It's a safe harbor.
So if you remove a hard metric like 80%, don't you just invite total chaos?
Yeah.
How does an auditor whose whole job is to verify reality audit a subjective concept like effectiveness without a threshold?
It's a very valid fear. It feels like the highway authorities took down the 65-mile-per-hour speed limit signs
Right.
and replaced them with signs that just say, drive at a speed that feels appropriate to your vehicle.
Which sounds like a recipe for a massive pileup.
On the surface, yes, the old rule was binary, broken or not broken. But we have to look at the immense collateral damage that old rule was causing to actual businesses.
Walk me through that collateral damage. What was actually happening to companies under the old rule?
Let's go back to your opening example with the CFO. Suppose a company has a legitimate, highly sophisticated, real-world risk management strategy.
Okay.
They import raw materials from the U.S., so they have this massive exposure to the USD to INR exchange rate.
Right, because INR is our functional currency. If the rupee drops, their costs explode.
Exactly. So they go out and buy forward contracts to lock in the price of the dollar. Economically, they have protected their cash flows beautifully.
They're safe.
But perhaps because of a slight timing mismatch, maybe the physical shipment arrives a week later than the forward contract expires.
Or maybe just a minor basis risk.
Right, some minor imperfection. Because of that, the statistical offset comes in at, say, 78% for that specific quarter.
So it's a slightly leaky bucket, but it's still catching 78% of the water. It's still doing its job.
Mostly, yes. But under the old rules, 78% is a catastrophic failure. Because they missed the 80% threshold, they are completely denied the use of hedge accounting.
And what does being denied hedge accounting actually look like on a company's financial statements? Because we throw that term around, but the mechanics are what actually hurt the company.
It means pure P&L volatility. Profit and loss chaos.
Break that down for me.
Normally, hedge accounting allows you to take the gains or losses on your derivative, which, fluctuate wildly every single day.
Right. Derivatives are super jumpy.
Exactly. It lets you take those wild swings and temporarily park them in a holding account called Other Comprehensive Income, or OCI.
Like a quarantine zone.
Yes, exactly like a quarantine zone or a parking lot. You park the volatility there until the actual underlying business transaction happens.
And then what?
Then you match them up in the P&L so they cancel each other out. It smooths the earnings perfectly.
Okay, so if I fail the 78% test, I don't get the keys to that OCI parking lot.
You are totally locked out. So now every single day, as the value of your forward contract swings up and down by millions of rupees,
Oh no.
all of those wild swings have to be reported directly in your immediate profit and loss statement.
So your core operating profits might be incredibly stable, like you're making great products.
But your net income looks like a violent roller coaster because of these unquarantined derivative swings.
Which makes the company look insanely risky to analysts and investors.
Precisely. The rigid accounting rule was literally forcing the financial statements to lie.
Wow.
The company was actually incredibly safe and well hedged in the real world, but the 80% rule made them look like chaotic gamblers.
So I imagine CFOs started changing their actual real-world business decisions just to fix the math.
They absolutely did. They would buy suboptimal hedges or take on different economic risks solely to ensure the math hit 81%.
Just to get the accounting treatment.
Yes. The tail was wagging the dog. The accounting was driving the economics instead of the other way around.
Okay, when you framed it like that, the 80 to 1, 25% rule sounds completely toxic. I get why they killed it.
It had to go.
But if that safety net is gone, what is my new North Star as an auditor staring at a client's books? If the old sign is torn down, what exactly is written on the new sign?
The new sign is found in paragraph 6.4.1 of Ind AS 109.
Paragraph 6.4.1.
Okay. This is the triad. It lays out the 3 mandatory qualifying criteria that a company must meet to apply hedge accounting. You have to pass through all 3 of these gates.
All right, let's not just list them. Let's really pressure test these gates.
Yeah.
What is the very first hurdle?
Gate number 1 is eligibility. Paragraph 6.4.1a states that the hedging relationship must consist only of eligible hedging instruments and eligible hedged items.
So I can't just, point to 2 random items on my balance sheet that happen to move in opposite directions and call it a hedge.
Absolutely not.
Give me a real-world example of what is not eligible. Because obviously a forward currency contract is eligible. What are companies trying to pass off as hedges that the standard explicitly bans?
Well, a great example is internal intra-group transactions that don't affect the consolidated entity.
Okay, explain that.
Say a parent company in Mumbai has a subsidiary in New York. The parent might try to say they're hedging the currency risk of a loan they gave to their own subsidiary.
Oh, I see.
But from a consolidated group perspective, when you roll up the financials, that internal loan eliminates itself. There is no actual external risk to the group.
Right, because you just owe money to yourself.
Exactly. And AS 109 says, no, that is not an eligible hedged item.
Are there other examples of forbidden items?
Yeah, another big one is trying to hedge a general business risk.
Like what?
Like the risk of a competitor launching a better product or the risk of an unseasonal monsoon.
Oh, things you can't really pin down financially.
Right. You can't quantify those with a specific financial instrument. The hedged item must be a highly probable forecast transaction, a recognized asset or liability, or an unrecognized firm commitment.
It has to create an actual quantifiable exposure to cash flow or fair value changes.
Exactly. It has to be tangible.
Okay, so gate 1 is strictly about having approved ingredients. You can't bake a cake with gravel. What is gate 2?
Gate 2 is where the standard replaces mathematical rigidity with administrative rigor.
Okay, sounds ominous.
It is formal designation and documentation. At the absolute inception of the hedging relationship, day 1, the entity must formally document the relationship.
Now, hold on. When you say document, how formal are we talking?
Very formal.
Because, in the real world, a treasury desk might execute a trade on a quick phone call or an instant message saying, hey, buy 10 million USD forward. Does that count as documentation?
Absolutely not. That is just a trade ticket. It proves a transaction happened, but it doesn't prove why.
Okay, so what does Ind AS 109 demand?
The documentation required is incredibly demanding. It must explicitly identify the exact hedging instrument. It must identify the specific hedged item or transaction.
So matching the specific derivative to the specific future shipment of steel, for instance?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it must state the precise nature of the risk being hedged. Is it the benchmark interest rate risk, the foreign currency risk, the commodity price risk? You have to specify.
That sounds reasonable so far.
But here's the kicker. It must also lay out exactly how the entity plans to assess whether this hedging relationship meets the effectiveness requirements going forward.
Oh, wow. They have to write down the grading rubric before they even take the test.
Exactly. They have to declare in writing their analysis of the expected sources of hedge ineffectiveness. Like, why might this hedge not be perfect? They have to explain that up front.
And they must document exactly how they're going to determine the hedge ratio.
Yes, all on day one.
I am going to push back here because this feels incredibly contradictory to me.
How so?
You just spent 10 minutes telling me Ind AS 109 was designed to be more liberal, more principles-based, and, friendlier to actual economic reality.
Right.
But this documentation requirement sounds like a bureaucratic nightmare. If the goal is to reflect economic reality, why can't a company just realize at the end of the year, hey, look at that, our assets and liabilities balanced each other out beautifully, and just claim hedge accounting then?
That's a great question.
Why this obsessive need for upfront, day one paperwork? It seems rigid in a different way.
That is a brilliant point of friction, but the contradiction is actually the entire point. The extreme strictness of the documentation is the required counterweight to the removal of the 80% rule.
The counterweight, explain that.
Think about it. When you remove a strict mathematical boundary, you open the door to massive subjectivity. If there wasn't a draconian documentation rule, you would unleash an absolute epidemic of something called hindsight accounting.
Hindsight accounting. Okay, break down how a CFO would actually execute that dark art.
Okay, imagine we are at the end of our reporting period. It's March 31st.
The dreaded end of the financial year.
Exactly. The CFO is looking at the draft P&L. They notice that the core business took a massive unexpected hit due to, say, a supply chain issue.
So profits are way down. The board is going to be furious.
Right. But coincidentally, the Treasury Department had taken a completely speculative naked position in a foreign currency derivative 3 months ago.
Just gambling on the market.
It's just a gamble. And that derivative happens to have made a massive profit.
A very lucky bet.
Exactly. Now, without strict day one documentation rules, that CFO could call the auditor on March 31st and say, oh, look at this. What a brilliant hedging strategy we had.
Oh, I see where this is going.
That derivative profit perfectly offsets our supply chain loss. Let's link them together, call it a hedge, park the volatility in OCI, and present a beautifully smooth profit figure to the board.
They are literally drawing the bullseye around the arrow after they already shot it.
Perfectly said. It is purely opportunistic reporting. It's fiction.
And Ind AS 109 aggressively bans this.
It absolutely crushes it. It demands that the accounting reflects pre-planned risk management.
You have to prove you meant to do it.
Yes. You have to prove on the day you bought the instrument that you bought it for the specific purpose of hedging that specific risk. If you don't have the day one documentation, you do not get the accounting treatment, period.
Wow, so the strict paperwork is essentially the toll you pay to access the flexible mathematics.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, I am sold. The gate keeps the opportunists out. So we have gate 1, eligible ingredients, and we have gate 2, an ironclad recipe written down before we start cooking.
Exactly.
What is the third and final gate?
The third gate is the actual effectiveness requirements. This is paragraph 6.4.1c.
Okay, the meat of it.
This is the new three-pronged test that officially takes the place of the old 80 to 1, 25% calculator check. And this is where we finally directly answer the querists' anxiety about how to measure effectiveness.
Let's drill into these 3 prongs deeply because this is where the rubber meets the road for the auditor. What is the first prong of this new effectiveness test?
Prong number 1. There must be an economic relationship between the hedged item and the hedging instrument.
Okay, economic relationship sounds great in a textbook, but what does it actually mean mechanically?
It means they have to be linked fundamentally.
Does it just mean they move in opposite directions? Like, if my stock portfolio goes down and the value of my house goes up, is that an economic relationship? I could say one hedges the other.
No, random negative correlation is not an economic relationship. The standard requires an expectation that the value of the hedging instrument and the value of the hedged item will systematically move in opposite directions in response to the exact same underlying risk.
The same underlying risk. It implies causality, not just coincidence.
Causality, exactly. Give me an example of the difference.
Oh, you want me to give one? Let's see. If you are an Indian airline buying aviation turbine fuel priced in USD.
Okay, good scenario.
Your underlying risk is the USD to INR exchange rate. If the rupee weakens, your fuel costs skyrocket.
Yes.
If you buy a USD to INR forward contract, that derivative's value will systematically increase exactly when the rupee weakens. They are both responding to the exact same underlying variable. That is a causal economic relationship.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
But if you try to hedge your jet fuel costs by buying forward contracts on, say, wheat, yeah, historically, maybe wheat prices and oil prices moved together for a few years due to general inflation.
Sure, macro trends.
But there is no systematic causal link. That is just statistical correlation, and that totally fails the test under Ind AS 109.
Okay, so the underlying risk has to be the exact same driver. But here is the multi-million rupee question.
Let's hear it.
Without the 80 to 125% rule, how much do they actually have to offset? What if my derivative only offsets, say, 60% of my fuel cost risk?
This is the massive paradigm shift of Ind AS 109. The entity itself gets to decide what degree of offset it considers an effective hedging relationship, provided they documented it in Gate 2.
Wait, really? The company just decides?
The accounting standard now defers to the entity's actual real-world risk management strategy.
That is huge.
It is. If the company's internal risk committee determines that a strategy offsetting only 60% of the risk is economically viable because maybe an 80% hedge is just too expensive to buy,
Right, premiums can be crazy.
the accounting standard says, fine, we will reflect your 60% reality.
So no more failing just because you missed 80%. If your goal was 60% and you hit 60%, you have a valid economic relationship.
Correct, you pass. But that economic relationship has a really lethal caveat attached to it.
A lethal caveat. I knew it couldn't be that easy.
And this brings us to prong number 2 of the effectiveness test, the role of credit risk.
Okay.
The standard explicitly dictates that the effective credit risk must not dominate the value changes that result from that economic relationship.
Dominate. That's a really strong word for an accounting standard. We're moving from math into almost like aggressive behavioral territory. What does it actually mean for credit risk to dominate?
I want to pause here because earlier you mentioned CVA and DVA in our outline prep, and I think we really need to unpack those mechanics for the listener.
Yes, let's go deep into CVA and DVA, credit valuation adjustment and debit valuation adjustment.
Let's assume you, the manufacturing CFO, enter into a massive forward contract with a global investment bank to buy $50 million in 6 months.
Okay, a huge trade.
Now, on paper, you are just betting on the exchange rate, but in reality, you are taking on a second hidden risk, counterparty credit risk.
Because it's not an exchange, it's a private contract.
Exactly. You are taking on the risk that in 6 months, this massive investment bank might just go bankrupt and default on its obligation to hand you those dollars.
Which sounds completely impossible until you remember 2008. The massive global banks absolutely can and do fail.
2008 is the exact reason this rule exists. So, CVA credit valuation adjustment is a mathematical haircut.
A haircut.
It is a deduction you make to the fair value of that derivative on your balance sheet to account for the probability that the bank will default.
Oh, I see. So if the derivative says it's worth $1 million, but the bank is shaky, maybe it's only worth $900,000 on your books.
Exactly. And DVA debit valuation adjustment is the inverse. It's an adjustment for the probability that your company will default on the bank.
Okay, so the fair value of a derivative isn't just the raw market price. It's the market price adjusted for the trustworthiness of the people shaking hands.
Precisely. Now, let's tie this back to the word dominate.
Right, prong number 2.
Let's say your economic relationship is perfect. The USD to INR rate moves, and your derivative perfectly offsets your business exposure. They are dancing perfectly in sync.
I love this visual. The economic relationship is the choreography. 2 dancers perfectly mirroring each other. I step left, you step right.
Right. Now, imagine one of those dancers represents the investment bank holding your derivative. Suddenly, news breaks that this bank is exposed to a massive, toxic mortgage collapse.
Oh boy.
Their credit rating gets slashed from AAA to junk status overnight.
So the dancer essentially trips and falls flat on their face on the stage. The choreography is ruined.
Yes. What happens to the fair value of your derivative? It plummets. Not because the USD to INR exchange rate changed. The exchange rate might be exactly the same. The derivative's value plummets because the market realizes the bank probably cannot honor the contract.
The CVA, the credit risk haircut, suddenly becomes so massive that it wipes out the market value.
Exactly. The fear of default has taken over the steering wheel. The changes in the value of the hedging instrument are no longer being driven by the economic relationship.
They're not driven by the currency rates at all.
No, they are entirely driven by the counterparty's impending collapse. The credit risk is now dominating the value changes.
And Ind AS 109 says, the moment that happens.
Your dance is over. You fail the effectiveness test and you instantly lose hedge accounting. Because practically speaking, you no longer have a hedge, you just have a massive exposure to a dying bank.
That is fascinating. The standard recognizes that a mathematically perfect hedge is utterly useless if the guy who owes you the money is broke.
It's grounded in stark reality.
Okay, so we have the economic relationship, and we ensure the credit risk isn't ruining the dance. What is the third and final prong of the effectiveness triad?
Prong number 3 relates to the hedge ratio.
Okay.
Paragraph 6.4.1c Roman numeral 3 states that the hedge ratio of the hedging relationship must be the same as that resulting from the quantity of the hedged item that the entity actually hedges and the quantity of the hedging instrument that the entity actually uses.
Okay, I have read that sentence 3 times in the source material, and it always sounds like a tautology to me.
It is a bit wordy.
The ratio must be the ratio you use. It just sounds like circular logic. What behavior is this rule actually trying to police?
It is policing deliberate manipulative imbalances.
Manipulative imbalances.
The standard goes on to explicitly state that an entity shall not designate a hedging relationship in a manner that reflects an imbalance between the weightings of the hedged item and the hedging instrument that would create hedge ineffectiveness, just to achieve an inconsistent accounting outcome.
Let's invent a scenario. Walk me through a dark arts accounting strategy where a CFO would try to weaponize an unbalanced ratio.
Let's look at earnings management. Say a company is having an incredibly profitable year, like uncomfortably profitable.
Uncomfortably profitable. Why is that bad?
Because Wall Street expects consistent growth. If you show a massive spike this year, they'll expect you to beat it next year. They know next year is going to be tough, so they want to hide some of this year's profit to use later.
The cookie jar P&L strategy.
Exactly. Now, let's say they have a legitimate currency exposure of 10 million USD.
Okay, so they need to buy 10 million in forward contracts to hedge it.
Right. But the CFO says, let's buy 20 million in forward contracts, but only designate 10 million of our business exposure as the hedged item.
They are deliberately overhedging.
Yes. Why? Because that extra 10 million in derivatives isn't offsetting anything. It will generate massive naked losses or gains that will flow directly into the P&L.
Wait, I see. If they structure it right, they can use the ineffectiveness of that deliberate imbalance to intentionally create accounting losses this year.
Driving down their reported profit, effectively storing those profits for the future.
They're using the complexity of derivatives as a fog machine to manipulate their bottom line. That is devious.
It is. And NDS 109 shuts that down completely. It says, no, the hedge ratio you use in your accounting documentation must be the actual physical ratio that your real-world risk management team determined was necessary to hedge the risk.
You cannot deliberately unbalance the scales just to manufacture a desired accounting result.
Exactly. It has to match reality.
So if we look at the querist's dilemma through the lens of this triad eligible items, strict documentation, and an economic relationship not dominated by credit risk or manipulated by false ratios, what is the definitive answer to their question?
The core question.
Right. Can 75% or 130% be considered effective?
To give them the final verdict, we have to touch on the statistical tool they are actually using to get those specific percentage numbers.
Let's do it.
When auditors and accountants test for this economic relationship, they don't just eyeball it. They usually use a statistical method called multiple regression analysis.
Regression analysis. Oh man, I remember suffering through this in university statistics. You plot a scatter graph. Right.
Right. You take historical data, you plot the historical changes in the fair value of your hedged item on the y-axis,
Okay.
and the historical changes in your hedging instrument on the x-axis. You draw a line of best fit. The output of that analysis generates a key statistic called R-squared, or the coefficient of determination.
And what does R-squared actually tell the auditor in plain English, without the jargon?
It measures the proportion of variance. An R-squared of 75% literally means that 75% of the volatility or the movement in your underlying business exposure is being successfully explained or offset by the movement of your derivative instrument.
Which means 25% of the movement is not being offset, it's leaking through. Why would a hedge leak that much?
Basis risk. Maybe you are hedging jet fuel, but the only liquid derivative market is for heating oil. They move similarly, but not perfectly.
Or timing differences.
Exactly. Your shipment arrives on the 15th, but your contract expires on the 30th. That creates a 75% R squared.
When conversely, an R squared of 130%.
That means the instrument is highly volatile. It is overcompensating, moving 30% more violently than the underlying item it's supposed to protect.
And under the old Ind AS 39, both 75% and 130% were immediate failures.
Yes, they miss the 80 to 1, 25% window. Immediate execution.
But under Ind AS 109, what's the verdict?
The verdict is unequivocally clear. The JAP advisor's response states it plainly. An R squared of 75% or 130% based on multiple regression analysis does not negate the instrument from being designated as a hedge instrument.
It does not negate it. The querist can breathe a massive sigh of relief. 75% is legal. 130% is legal.
They are legal because of the ultimate guiding philosophy of Ind AS 109, which is enshrined in paragraph 6.1.1.
What does that paragraph say?
It states that the fundamental objective of hedge accounting is to represent, in the financial statements, the effect of an entity's risk management activities.
To represent the effect.
Yes. The goal is to convey the context of these instruments to allow investors insight into their purpose and effect.
Insight into purpose and effect. You know, when you put it like that, it makes the old 80% rule look totally archaic.
It really was.
It's almost like the old standard treated accounting as a strict math exam you had to pass. But Ind AS 109 treats accounting like a documentary film.
I like that.
The goal isn't to hit a perfect score. The goal is to accurately tell the story of how the company's behaving in the real world.
Storytelling through numbers is a perfect analogy. If the company's genuine risk management objective, as documented on day one, is achieved despite a 25% leakage,
Then the accounting should reflect that reality.
exactly. It should not punish the company for failing to hit an arbitrary 80% mark.
Okay, philosophically, I am entirely on board. I get it.
Hmm.
But let me put my auditor hat back on.
Uh-oh.
Because I can't audit a documentary film. I have to audit journal entries. I need to know how to actually book a 75% effective hedge.
Yeah.
Let's make this abstract statistical theory completely concrete.
To do the math.
I want us to build a real-world scenario using the ground rules we set up. Indian rupee functional currency, US dollar foreign currency.
Okay. We will use the exact mathematical breakdown provided in the Gap advisor's response.
Perfect.
Our company is exposed to foreign currency risk. They have to pay $1 million to a supplier in 6 months.
So their risk is that the rupee depreciates against the dollar, making that 1 million USD vastly more expensive in terms of INR.
Exactly. To protect themselves, they enter into a forward contract to buy USD at a fixed INR rate.
A perfect scenario. And just to keep the math clean, let's assume our investment bank counterparty is rock solid.
Right, no credit risk dominating. We ignore CVA and DVA for this calculation.
So the company runs their multiple regression analysis on this strategy, and the R squared comes out to exactly 75%. Step 1. What does this mean physically for the company?
It means the bucket is leaking 25%. The derivative instrument only hedges exactly 75% of the notional value of the hedged item.
Okay, so the Treasury team has to figure out the physical hedge ratio. How many contracts do they actually need to buy?
There are 2 ways to express this mathematical ratio. Let's walk through perspective number 1.
Okay, perspective 1, let's hear it.
Perspective number 1 is from the view of the hedging instrument. To match the risk, the ratio is USD, one of the hedging instrument, to USD 0.75 of the hedged item.
Okay, so for every $1 of derivative contract I hold in my hand, it is effectively only acting as a shield for 75 cents of my actual real-world business exposure.
Yes. That is a 1 to 0.75 ratio. Simple.
Simple enough. What is the second perspective?
The second way is from the perspective of the hedged item. If we want to fully cover $1 of our actual business risk, we divide 1 by 0.75.
Right, basic algebra.
The ratio becomes USD 1.3, 3 of the hedging instrument to USD 1 of the hedged item.
Wait, hold on. Stop right there.
What's wrong?
You're telling me that to hedge my $1 million exposure, I have to go to the bank and buy $1.33 million worth of forward contracts.
That is correct.
How does an auditor look at a massive overpurchase like that and not immediately flag it as pure speculation? That sounds incredibly risky. I am taking on $330,000 of extra derivative exposure.
It looks like speculation until you understand the basis risk that created the 75% R squared in the first place.
Explain that to me. Because right now it looks like gambling.
Remember, the derivative is leaky. It doesn't move perfectly with the exposure. If the rupee drops by 10%, your real-world exposure increases by 10%.
Right.
But your specific derivative, because of its terms, might only increase by 7.5%.
Ah, so the instrument is sluggish.
Exactly.
Huh.
So if you only buy 1 million in contracts and the rupee drops 10%, you suffer a 100,000 rupee loss on the business side.
But my sluggish derivative only gives me a 75,000 rupee gain. So I am underhedged. I bleed 25,000 rupees.
So to compensate for the sluggishness of the instrument, what do? You have to pump up the sheer volume of the instruments you hold.
Oh, I scale up the volume.
Precisely. By buying 1.33 million in contracts, when that sluggish 7.5% gain hits, it is multiplying against a much larger base.
Let me do the math. 1.33 million times 7.5% equals roughly 100,000.
Now, your derivative game perfectly matches your 100,000 business loss. The absolute dollar amounts offset, even though the percentages are mismatched.
That is brilliant. You are aligning the physical volume of the trade with the mathematical percentage of its effectiveness.
And this is where the strict documentation from Gate 2 absolutely saves you from the auditor.
How so?
As long as you documented on day one that your instrument is only 75% effective, and therefore your designated ratio is 1.33 to 1.
The auditor can look at your purchase of 1.33 million in contracts and say, yes, this perfectly aligns with your documented risk management strategy.
You are not speculating. You are compensating for an imperfect market.
Okay, the math makes total sense to me now. It's a huge relief. But here is where the headache really begins for the accounting department.
Oh, we're just getting started.
The financial markets are not frozen in amber. The USD to INR correlation is fluctuating every microsecond. An R squared of 75% today is not going to be 75% tomorrow.
No, it certainly will not be.
What happens when the effectiveness of that instrument changes over time?
This leads us to the most labor-intensive part of Ind AS 109, the concept of prospective assessment and mandatory rebalancing.
Rebalancing.
The standard requires that you must reassess this effectiveness on a prospective, forward-looking basis at the end of every single reporting period.
Tying back to our ground rules, that means every single year as the finance team approaches March 31st.
They can't just copy-paste last year's work.
They have to rerun the entire statistical model.
Every single March 31st. They have to look at current market data and ask, based on how the world looks today, what is our expected effectiveness for the next reporting period?
Let's continue our scenario then. Let's assume on March 31st, the Treasury team runs the regression analysis again. Our market dynamics have shifted. The liquidity in the forward market has improved, and the correlation between your derivative and your business exposure has strengthened. In the next reporting period, your expected R squared improves from 75% up to 90%.
Okay, so the instrument became less sluggish. It is now 90% effective at tracking our risk.
Economically, that is fantastic news. We have a better shield.
Economically, yes, it's great. But accounting-wise, it triggers an immediate mathematical crisis.
A crisis. Why?
We have to calculate the new ratios based on 90%. Let's run the arithmetic again. What does 90% look like?
Okay, from the instrument's perspective, the new ratio is USD1 of hedging instrument to USD 0.90 of the hedged item.
And from the IDER's perspective, dividing 1 by 0.90, the new ratio is USD 1.11 of the hedging instrument to USD 1 of the hedged item.
Whoa. Okay, let's look at the physical reality of our company.
Yeah.
Based on the old 75% math, we went out and bought 1.33 million in contracts to cover our 1 million exposure. We physically hold those contracts.
You own them.
But the new math says we only need 1 million in contracts to get full coverage.
Exactly. You are now holding 0.22 million or $220,000 in excess derivative contracts that are no longer necessary for the hedge.
I have a deliberate imbalance forming.
Which, as we discussed in Gate 3, is strictly prohibited by the standard. Therefore, the standard dictates that the company must rebalance the hedge relationship.
Must. It's not a suggestion. It's a requirement to keep the hedge accounting privilege.
It is not optional. The Gap Advisor's response outlines the precise mechanical adjustments you have to make to realign your accounting with the new economic reality. You basically have two choices to fix the ratio.
What is choice number 1?
Choice 1. The entity must designate an additional USD 0.15 of the hedged item. You are moving the item ratio up from 0.75 to 0.90 to match your instrument.
Meaning, I have to go find an additional $150,000 of real-world business risk within my company and officially attach it to the derivatives I already hold.
That's right.
That sounds extremely difficult if I don't actually have any more incoming U.S. dollar shipments. I can't just invent risk.
It often is difficult, which is why choice 2 is far more common.
What's choice 2?
Choice 2. You de-designate a portion of the hedging instrument.
De-designate. Okay.
You move the instrument ratio down from 1.33 to 1.11. This means you formally remove USD 0.22, that excess $220,000 of your derivatives from the official hedge accounting relationship.
Let's pause on the phrase de-designate. What actually happens to that $220,000 portion of the contract? Do I have to, call the bank and cancel it, sell it off?
No, you don't necessarily have to unwind the physical trade with the bank, though you could if you wanted to. But purely from an accounting perspective, de-designating means that 0.22 fraction of the derivative loses its VIP access to the OCI parking lot.
Oh, so it gets kicked out into the cold.
Exactly. That 0.22 portion is now classified as a naked speculative derivative.
So any future gains or losses on that specific fraction of the contract will now flow directly with full volatility into my immediate profit and loss statement.
Yes. Only the remaining 1.1 portion stays protected in the hedge accounting relationship.
That is a phenomenal mechanic. I want to try an analogy here. Tell me if this tracks.
Let's hear it.
It feels exactly like tuning a guitar.
Okay.
You don't just tune a guitar once when you buy it, put it in the case, and assume it will stay perfectly in key forever. The temperature changes, the humidity shifts, the strings stretch over time. At the end of every set, or in our case, every reporting period on March 31st, you have to get the tuner out. You tweak the pegs, tightening a fraction here, loosening a fraction there, to make sure the frequency is still offset properly and the chords stay harmonious.
That is the perfect metaphor. Rebalancing is literally the tuning peg of Ind AS 109. It ensures that the hedge ratio never drifts away from the actual economic reality, period after period, no matter how the market environment changes.
But listen, let's talk about the human element of this.
Yeah.
Because running complex multiple regression models, recalculating expected effectiveness, tracking fragmented portions of derivatives across OCI and P&L.
A lot.
This rebalancing process sounds like an absolute administrative nightmare for a corporate finance team. Every single March 31st, it's a massive analytical burden.
It requires highly sophisticated treasury systems and very, very smart accountants, yes.
So if I'm the CFO,
Yeah.
and after, say, 3 years of this tedious tuning process, I decide the administrative cost is just too high, can I just quit? Can I just call my auditor and say, you know what? This is too much effort for a 5% margin of error. We are formally withdrawing from hedge accounting. We will just take the P&L volatility from now on.
This brings us to one of the most draconian and heavily debated rules within the entire standard, the no-exit clause of Ind AS 109.
The no exit clause.
The standard explicitly, categorically prohibits voluntary discontinuation of hedge accounting.
Wait,
What?
you heard me.
I can't quit.
Once a hedge relationship is established, and assuming your underlying risk management objective hasn't changed, and the hedge still meets those 3 qualifying criteria, even if it requires tedious rebalancing, the company must keep on rebalancing and applying the accounting.
It's a one-way street.
It is a one-way street. You cannot discontinue hedge accounting voluntarily.
That sounds like a trap. It's the Hotel California of accounting standards. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave.
It does feel like that. Why on earth would an accounting standard literally force a company to stay in a complex administrative relationship if management decides they want out? That seems overly punitive.
Because if the standard allowed voluntary discontinuation, it would hand CFOs the ultimate, most powerful weapon for earnings management.
Okay, let's dive into the dark arts again. How would a CFO weaponize the ability to just walk away from a hedge?
Let's revisit the mechanics of that OCI parking lot.
The quarantine zone.
Right. Hedge accounting defers the gains or losses on the derivative instrument in other comprehensive income until the underlying transaction happens. Let's say it's Q3. A CFO is looking at their quarterly projections. The core operations of the company have had an absolute blockbuster quarter. They are going to crush analyst expectations.
But maybe they don't want to crush them too hard.
Right, the classic cookie jar problem we talked about earlier. If you show 30% growth this quarter, Wall Street will demand 30% growth next quarter. The CFO wants to hide some of those profits in a cookie jar to smooth out the growth curve.
Makes sense from their perspective.
Exactly. Now imagine the same CFO looks at their derivative portfolio. They have a massive forward contract that is currently sitting at a $5 million loss. But because it is in a designated hedge relationship, that $5 million loss is safely quarantined inside OCI. It hasn't touched the profit and loss statement.
So it's an accounting purgatory.
Right. If voluntary discontinuation were allowed, the CFO could simply draft a memo saying, "We find the administrative burden of this hedge too high. We are voluntarily discontinuing hedge accounting today."
And what happens to the $5 million in purgatory?
The moment you discontinue, the quarantine drops. Boom. That $5 million derivative loss is violently flushed out of OCI and crashes directly onto the Q3 profit and loss statement.
Instantly wiping out $5 million of their blockbuster operational profit.
Precisely.
They have successfully lowered their Q3 earnings to look more consistent, successfully stuffing the cookies into the jar.
Exactly. They would be treating hedge accounting like a light switch. They would flick it on when they want to hide volatility, and they would flick it off when they want to intentionally manufacture losses to manage the optics of their earnings trend.
That is terrifyingly clever.
And that is exactly why Ind AS 109 says absolutely not.
It closes the loop.
The standard enforces ruthless discipline and consistency. If your real-world risk management strategy hasn't changed, if you are still holding the derivative to protect against the currency risk, then your accounting strategy cannot change.
You're locked in.
You must transparently reflect your actual risk management activities, and you must do it consistently year after year, even when it is administratively burdensome, and even when it ruins your desired earnings narrative.
It forces the company to tell the truth continuously.
Yes.
So let's pull all of this together. We started this deep dive talking about the comfort of the 80 to 125% rule.
The old rigid standard.
The rigid binary broken or not broken X-ray of the old standard. And we've seen how Ind AS 109 tore that down and replaced it with a philosophy that demands economic reality.
It demands the truth.
We've seen how it demands strict upfront documentation to prevent hindsight accounting. We've explored the massive complexities of multiple regression, the 1.33 scaling ratio.
And the absolute necessity of constant perspective rebalancing every March 31st.
Right. And the Hotel California no exit clause that prevents earnings manipulation. It forces you to transparently reflect your actual risk management activities.
It really is a comprehensive framework.
But looking at the entirety of this landscape, this raises a really provocative question for me to ponder. Something that wasn't explicitly in the Gap Advisor's response, but feels like the inevitable consequence of this new philosophy.
What is the question?
If a company's internal risk management strategy is, in reality, highly volatile, erratic, or just poorly designed by an incompetent executive team, does this liberal, principles-based accounting standard inadvertently act as a magnifying glass?
Oh, that's an interesting angle.
By forcing the financial statements to relentlessly mirror the actual economic strategy, does Ind AS 109 end up exposing bad corporate governance directly to the investors?
Oh, I see what you mean.
Under the old rules, maybe a poorly run company just failed the 80% test, suffered some P&L noise, and blamed it on complex accounting rules.
They could hide behind the standard.
Exactly. But under these new rules, their actual chaotic 40% effective, constantly tripping over credit risk strategy is fully documented and laid bare on the balance sheet for the whole world to see.
That is a phenomenal and sobering thought to leave the audience with. The old standard allowed companies to hide behind the rigidity of the math.
It gave them an excuse.
In AS 109, strips away the math and puts the management's actual competence on display. It isn't just an accounting standard, it is a transparency mechanism for corporate governance.
Exactly. It's something to deeply consider the next time you are analyzing a complex set of financial statements and wondering why the hedge ratios look so chaotic.
It tells a story.
It does. We want to thank you all so much for your time today, diving deep into the mathematical weeds and the philosophical implications of Ind AS 109 with us.
It's been a great discussion.
If you found this breakdown valuable, if it clarified the mechanics of rebalancing or the reality of credit risk for you, we explicitly request that you follow or subscribe to the Gap Advisors NAS Clinic podcasts.
Yes, please do.
You can find us on Spotify, on Amazon Music, and on YouTube, whichever platform you prefer to listen to the Gap Advisors NAS Clinic podcasts on.
And please do not let this deep dive stop with you.
Yes, a specific plea to you, our listener. Please share this discussion among your professional contacts, your colleagues, your audit teams, and your corporate finance departments.
Share the knowledge.
And I want to make a special request that you share this with students who are currently pursuing the CA course.
They need this practical context.
Understanding the why and the how behind the application of Indian accounting standards. Understanding that accounting is not just memorizing journal entries, but translating economic reality into a global language is crucial for the next generation of professionals.
We want to help spread that practical knowledge as widely as possible.
Because as we have unpacked today, a standard like Ind AS 109 proves that accounting is ultimately about uncovering the truth behind the numbers.
It truly is.
We started by talking about how a medical diagnosis used to feel like looking at a clean, simple X-ray of a broken bone. The old 80 to 1, 25% rule was that X-ray. It was comfortable, it was easy to read, but sometimes it forced the doctor to ignore the actual health of the patient.
It missed the nuance.
And AS 109 breaks the X-ray machine. It forces auditors and accountants to navigate the highly complex, muddy waters of actual economic relationships.
It is much messier.
It requires constant, tedious rebalancing, and you can never voluntarily walk away from the diagnostic process. But ultimately, it forces the financial statements to tell a much truer, much more transparent story about the survival and health of the business. Thanks for diving in with us. We will see you on the next deep dive.